right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. As you can see on the screen there, we'd like for you to enter your name and organization into the chat window so that we can have an accurate record of your attendance today. Also, please mute your microphone and please note that we are recording this session today, and this will be available on the application portal website, and we'll walk through that towards the end of the presentation today. So if you have others you'd like to view this presentation, or you just want to refer back to it, you will have that opportunity in the near future as well. We'll look to get that up here as quickly as we can. So again, this is our 2022 Suballocated Programs Call for Projects Phase 2 Technical Evaluation Workshop. Agenda for our evaluation workshop today, I'll do a welcome and introduction. We'll do an overview of the programming process and where we are in that particular process. We'll talk about some important regional policy considerations and resources for you as you complete your application. We'll also talk about some additional application information and tips maybe, and some considerations for you as you're working through the application, and we'll wrap everything up with kind of a demonstration of the actual application portal so you can kind of get a feel for that and see it kind of live and in person. As far as the introductions go, I'm Mark Hansen, Principal Planner here at Mid-America Regional Council. I will be somewhat for Phase 2, I will be somewhat of your tour guide as we head through this process. Along with me today is Martin Riverola, our Assistant Director of Transportation and Environment. He's on the call today. Should you have any questions, Martin will be able to chime in there as well. So let's dive right in and get into kind of the programming process. We'll talk a little bit about the overview of the process, anticipated funding levels, as some of those have kind of changed, and we'll talk about why that is. Committee assignments, and then the programming timeline for how this. As you are all aware at this point, our programming process is a two-step process. We recently wrapped up Phase 1, or what we like to call our pre-application process, or Phase 1. This is an assessment by our planning and policy committees of how well an individual application addresses and lines up with kind of the goals and objectives of various regional policies and programs, most notably CONNECTEDKC 2050, our long-range or metropolitan plan. We also have the technical application, or Phase 2. This is the more traditional application that many of you are familiar with. And this is when we will go through a process to score each individual application against the criteria set up by the individual programming committees to kind of evaluate and help prioritize projects. Both of the phases are required. So if you did not submit an application in Phase 1, you are not going to be able to continue into Phase 2. You needed to do Phase 1. However, if you do need to find yourself in a situation where you need to split a particular project into maybe two different applications, there are some steps we can take to help facilitate that. It's not a terribly easy process, but we can get through that and help you out with that should that become necessary. I should note, in that pre-application process, we did provide some feedback from two levels. So staff provided feedback to every individual applicant on their project. That came through in mid-May via email from Jermaine Whitmore here on Mark's staff. So if you missed that email, you might want to kind of look back through your email and see if you had an email from Jermaine on May 13th. That is when we sent out kind of staff feedback. And we are still compiling the committee feedback that was done through the Phase 1 process, and we hope to have that out to you early next week. And so you'll have both of those pieces of information to kind of help work through your Phase 2 application. Anticipated funding, some of these have changed a little bit as a result of the passage of the bipartisan infrastructure law that did raise funding levels considerably in a few of the programs. Congestion mitigation and air quality did not see very much change related to that. So those numbers have kind of held steady. A surface transportation block grant program, we did see increases of about 10% in that program as far as our obligation authority goes. So we will have some additional resources to program. The numbers that you see on the screen there at 29.6 million in Kansas and 52.2 million in Missouri, those do include some measure of over programming that our committees have typically done to guard against kind of funding coming back into the program from projects that return small amounts of funding as they go through closeout. And so we do kind of safeguard against those types of activities by over programming slightly. And then the largest one, as far as increases goes, comes in the Transportation Alternatives Program, $4.4 million in Kansas, which is a healthy increase there, as well as $10 million over the 2-year period in Missouri, which is a very significant increase. We are now up to about $5 million per year on the Missouri side as far as Transportation Alternatives Program funding goes. Again, that is a direct result of changes from the bipartisan infrastructure law. You can see the total anticipated for programming. We were just under $40 million in Kansas and just over $68 million in Missouri. So quite a bit of funding going on in this particular funding round. CMAQ is one where the only program where MARC kind of allocates funding to different particular areas based kind of on the program area within CMAQ. So you can see the totals available for CMAQ. The MARC regional projects, which are air quality, public education, rideshare, and active transportation, they take some funding off the top by way of the MARC Board of Directors, $927,000 each over the 2-year period. And then we break it out by alternative fuel, diesel retrofit, and outreach and other, which takes 11% of the funding. And you can see the kind of the resulting funding amounts each in Kansas and Missouri. Bicycle and pedestrian gets 15% of the funding, and then traffic flow and transit projects take 37% of the funding, all totaling up there to 100%. So you can see those CMAQ allocations. That is what the committee's programming CMAQ funding will have to work with. Surface Transportation Block Grant Program, again, is our largest program. Operation Greenlight takes a little money off of the top again by way of TTPC and the MARC Board of Directors, about $500,000 in Kansas and $1.2 million in Missouri, and it's kind of the total anticipated for programming there. Committee assignments, we do this for a variety of committees. Our Surface Transportation Block Grant Program is kind of administered by our Surface Transportation Priorities committees in Kansas and Missouri. The alternative fuel, diesel retrofit, and outreach and other of CMAQ is managed by Air Quality Forum, and you can see on the screen here as well, we've provided kind of the MARC staff contact for each of those committees. I am responsible for the Missouri and Kansas STP priorities committees. Karen Clausen from our staff handles Air Quality Forum. The CMAQ bicycle and pedestrian programming is done by our Active Transportation Programming Committee. That is manned by Patrick Truba here on our staff. Traffic flow for CMAQ is done by our STP priorities, again, in Kansas and Missouri. And then finally, our CMAQ transit programming is handled by our Regional Transit Coordinating Council, and that's staffed at this time by Martin Riverola. And finally, our Transportation Alternatives Program is done by the Active Transportation Programming Committee, again, staffed by Patrick Truba. A little bit about our programming timeline. You should have gotten an email from us back on last week, June 23rd, that announced kind of the call for phase 2 being open. We are now here on June 30th doing our technical application workshop. The application will remain open until July 29th when it will close. Staff will then go through the process of evaluating the projects against the scoring criteria adopted by each of the programming committees. We will work through any comments we receive from individual applicants. You'll all have the ability to see your evaluation score and have a chance to ask questions, talk about how staff arrived at a particular score. We'll work through that period, and hopefully by mid to late September, we'll be completed with all of the staff assessment steps, and we can get down to the work of going through our programming committees to develop funding recommendations. We hope to have those funding recommendations completed in mid-December, and then we will go through the process of amending all of those funding recommendations into the Regional Transportation Improvement Program, which should wrap up with board approval here at Mid-America Regional Council at the end of January 2023. Once the TIP amendment process is completed and finalized by USDOT, you will be able to begin working with your requisite funding agency, whether that be KDOT, MoDOT, or the Federal Transit Administration, to begin project development activities. So hopefully we will have a nice, smooth process. There should be ample amounts of time to work through the committee process on this particular programming timeline. So before we jump into regional policy considerations, we'll take a quick look. Martin, are there any questions in the chat box related to kind of that process overview? I'm not
no, Mark, there are no questions.
Great. So
good to go.
We will step on then into some important regional policy considerations that you may take into account as you work through the phase 2 component of your application. We provided a lot of this information to you for phase 1. But again, it is always a great idea to go back to kind of these important regional policy plans and programs and reference those in your application and make sure you are taking those into account as you move forward through the application. Some of the more major policies and plans that we would like for you to continue to look at and find ways to integrate into your applications are our CONNECTEDKC 2050 Metropolitan Transportation Plan, our Complete and Green Street Policy, the Congestion Management Process Policy. This is particularly important policy for those of you looking to add a single occupant vehicle to the system through your applications, our Climate Action Plan, and then some other important plans, including our Green Infrastructure Framework, our Major River Crossing Policy, and our Transit Plan, Smart Moves 3.0. CONNECTEDKC 2050 at a glance. Essentially, the plan outlined 5 things that we were really interested in seeing as a region: access to opportunity, public health and safety, healthy environment, transportation choices, and economic vitality. And we outlined a series of strategies and objectives of how we will get there, mainly focusing on centers and corridors through the promotion of climate protection and resilience, looking for new funding sources, and we have found somewhat of a new funding source as the increased resources that came through in the bipartisan infrastructure law certainly kind of fall into new funding sources. And so there are additional resources within our region to work with. We will prioritize investments, again, against kind of those goals and objectives of our Metropolitan Transportation Plan. And we will leverage data and technology as best as possible to further our progress into getting to where we want to go. Streets, the Complete Streets policy applies to all MARC planning activities that involve public right-of-way. Any activities such as this one conducted by MARC to program federal funds. Planned and programmed projects shall provide safe accommodations for all users who have legal access. The policy is sensitive to both current and future community context. Exceptions may be granted under certain circumstances. For instance, probably the most notable exception or easiest exception to understand is bicycle and pedestrian accommodation on an interstate highway may not be necessary as bicycles and pedestrians are generally not allowed on interstate highways. And the MARC Complete Streets policy is consistent with federal guidance when it comes to providing bicycle and pedestrian accommodations with federally funded transportation projects. Congestion management process, we updated this process in 2020 to align better with CONNECTEDKC 2050. It's a systematic way of monitoring, measuring, and diagnosing the causes of congestion. It evaluates and recommends strategies for managing congestion. It also monitors and evaluates the performance of implemented strategies. And applications that seek to add single occupant vehicle capacity must justify that that project is necessary in order to manage congestion. And applications for SOV capacity projects must include transportation demand management and operational strategies in the project scope. And additional information is available on the MARC website about the congestion management process. Climate Action Plan. This is a relatively new plan for MARC, but very important in kind of advancing our region towards our stated goals. So key goals: transform our region into a more resilient, equitable, and healthy one, achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, and adapt to the many risks posed by climate change. You can see we've listed out a handful of climate mitigation and climate adaptation strategies for you to consider within your applications. Notable among them: decreased fossil fuel usage, transition to electric vehicles, and decrease in vehicle miles of travel, but also kind of reducing waste and increasing demand for reused and recycled materials, as well as conserving and restoring our green infrastructure. And there are some additional strategies to consider in your application: a reduction in vehicle miles traveled, low and no emissions vehicles, shifting of trips to affordable, equitable, and safe mobility options, as well as increasing the transportation system's resilience. As you can see, we've kind of identified a handful of strategies under each of those for you to consider. Those are probably the more accessible ones for a transportation application to work through under the Climate Action Plan. Before I step through into kind of the application itself, any questions in the chat box related to regional policy considerations?
No, Mark, I do not see any.
No. Great. So application, many of you who have used our application before know that this is kind of a 5-step process that we do. There's a registration or a login page. There's some general project information. Choices you make in that general project information then lead you or branch you into category specific information related to that a particular selection. Then we move into financial information about your project, as well as the opportunity to kind of upload some supporting documentation as well. And you'll see all of this when we do the actual demonstration of the phase 2 application. Application portal, you log in using the previously established credentials. So the credentials you used in phase 1, you will use them again for phase 2. You can reset your password using the forgot password function. I should note, MARC staff has no ability to kind of reset your password. So this is really the only way for you. Should you forget a password, this is really your only option for resetting that password. When you log in, you'll see a list of projects that are tied to your email address or your login information in the first phase. And there's kind of a small screenshot of that on the bottom right there. You can see you have some choices there, whether that be edit, print, or delete. You can continue your application to complete the technical evaluation, and I can't emphasize this last bullet point enough. Use the report issue at the top. That button, if you encounter any problems, please use that report issue button. It is your most efficient and effective way in getting your problem addressed. While you are certainly welcome to send me an email, as many of you have done in the past, know that when it comes to this particular application, I end up being somewhat of a middleman, and it takes a little more time than if you just use the report issue button, which can directly take you to the staff that can quickly address your issue. Note here about responsible charge. This is to encourage timely and efficient project delivery. Applicants must identify the person in responsible charge for each application. The person in responsible charge is knowledgeable of the federal aid process, familiar with state letting procedures, and is responsible for project administration, agreements, signatures, billings, etc. And it's expected to be a full-time public employee or elected official, even when consultants are providing engineering services. More information about responsible charge can be found on the local public agency sections of the KDOT and MoDOT websites, and we have provided a link to you to both of those websites in the application resources, which I will be sure to show you how to access those resources when we go into the demonstration. kind of not everybody's favorite topic, but one we certainly need to make sure you are all aware of as we go through this. The project fee. MARC does collect a project fee equivalent to 1% of the federal funds awarded to any project selected through a MARC transportation project selection or programming process. Non-refundable fee is charged to the project sponsor, and MARC assesses the fees on an annual basis, reflecting all programming work completed in the prior year. More information can be found, sorry about that, there's a typo, not on the local public agency sections of the KDOT and MoDOT website. That information is on MARC's website, and there's a link to it within the application resources, but these project fees from this call for projects will be invoiced in and are payable in 2023. Resources for applicants that we provide you a variety of technical resources. There's a GIS mapping tool with a whole host of data that you can turn on and off and see kind of where your project lies in relation to those different types of information. We provide population and employment forecasts. The scoring criteria are available on the resources page, and items like the natural resources inventory are available both on that resources as well as within the GIS mapping tool. We provide state and federal resources, including local public agency policies and procedures, as well as federal program fact sheets, which give you some kind of quick information about what types of projects are eligible and how the funding levels were arrived at through the federal kind of process. Other important details to note: you can edit and update your projects up until the deadline, even if you have already hit submit on the project. Do note that if you have already submitted a project or completed all the way through the application, feel like you're done and you've hit submit, you can still edit that. You just need to go back through and make sure you submit that project again for those changes to be applied. And the projects are specific to the person that submitted them. If access by others is desired, you'll need to share your login credentials in order to be able to do that. We can, if staff turnover happens, we can change who the individual application is assigned to. You just need to let me know who's leaving and who we're changing that to, and we can go about getting that process done for you. You can print your application at any point. You should note when you start your application, before you select a funding stream or a funding program that you're interested in for your application, if you print your application before you make that selection, you will see every possible question that could apply to your project as if you were eligible and applying for all 3 of the funding programs. Once you make a selection there, you'll only see questions that apply to the funding programs that you have selected. Another tip to emphasize pretty heavily: save your work often. The application itself does time out after 3 hours. So every 3 hours, you're going to need to log back into it. So make sure that you're saving your work. I would hate to see you all fill out a complete page of work and get called away from your desk and have you lose that due to the application timing out. So please save your work often. And again, for the fastest response, please use the report issue button to let MARC staff know of any problems you experience within the application, and we will remedy those as quickly as possible. Again, the deadline for applications and any changes to your application is Friday, July 29th at 4:00 p.m. local time here in Kansas City. Please make sure that you are complete with your application by that point to ensure that your application is complete and can be considered. There are a list of MARC staff for you to contact should you have any questions for things perhaps outside of the actual application itself. Again, use that report issue button within the application, but should you have questions about a variety of different things, there are a handful of us here at MARC that can assist you in a variety of things, and we have kind of identified the individual areas for folks who can help you in addressing those. Of course, Ron Ackelpool is our Director of Transportation and Environment. Martin Riverola on the call is our Assistant Director. He handles mainly transportation policy considerations, but this time around, you can ask Martin transit questions as well. I'm Mark Hansen. I handle the application process and funding. Patrick Truba does bicycle and pedestrian. Tom Jacobs on our staff here is our environmental programs director and handles climate and green infrastructure. And please do make use of Tom as you go through your application looking for ways in which to address climate and green infrastructure. Those tend to be areas where folks struggle a little bit with making the connections to their applications. So please do feel free to reach out to Tom and get advice about that. And then Karen Clausen is our air quality program manager and handles climate and air quality and can help you out with any question you might have related to those areas. I'm looking to see if I have any questions in the chat for this particular section. Doesn't look like it today. So it's like we are going to move on ahead into the demonstration of the application itself. So I'm going to stop sharing this particular screen and I will switch over to the actual, we'll get back on the internet here. So hopefully you all can see that I am on CONNECTEDKC.org/funding, which is kind of our main page for our suballocated federal funding programs. And there's some information here about kind of guidebooks for each of the different programs, which have some good information in them, a lot of background information about project eligibility and other handful of details that are be helpful to you. We do talk about anticipated funding levels. We outline the application process here. We are in phase 2. Here is a link to our funding application resources, and I'll take advantage of that link here and show you kind of the wealth of resources that are available to you as you go through looking for ideas and help in doing your application and resources to complete those applications. So a wide variety of resources available to you, federal resources as well, and then some state resources for both KDOT and MoDOT. Here is a link to our application portal, and we'll go into the portal here in just a second. Application workshops, we do have the recording from phase 1 available to you here on this page. We will post the phase 2 workshop that we're doing right now. This will get posted to this page as well, so you'll be able to access it at a later time should you need to. We also provide kind of this resource map and some direction about how to use the resource map here at the bottom of this page. And so you can see, you can kind of scroll in and out. There's a whole variety of different information you can kind of turn on and off as far as what you want to see, what you're working through at any particular given time. So that's where this map lives, and you can access that fairly easily. So we'll jump right into the application portal. So all you have to do is log in using your credentials established under the phase 1 application. When you log in, you should see kind of applications that are tied to you. I've had our IT services place for me copies of some projects that Mark had submitted under phase 1. So if you're the Mark staff responsible for these 2 projects, don't be worried that I'm screwing around with your application. These are just copies, but you can see kind of the lay of the land here a little bit. Your report issue button up here at the top right. You can also see you can edit each project, print it, or delete it. So we'll look at this first one here. I can choose that one, and you can see kind of all of the questions that are available to you, including the answers that you provided under phase 1. You can kind of see all of that. You can print this application as well. So quite a bit of information there for you, and it's just a simple manner of printing through your normal method. I should note, in the past, we've been able to provide you with kind of PDF templates of the application that kind of had the look and feel of the application. You could pull on the drop-down menus and see all your choices. Unfortunately, the new programming language that has been used to construct this portal kind of has precluded us from being able to provide that information to you. We're still looking for a way to do that, but printing the application may be your best bet. If you'd like to work on the application offline, you can at least see all of the questions that are available to you. You can kind of formulate your answers offline and then cut and paste back into the application. So when you're ready to work on your funding application, you just hit the edit button and you can kind of jump back in here. Again, you have some options across the top, including report issues. You can cancel any of the things you're working on and just kind of back out of the application. You can save it. Again, use this save button often to guarantee that you're not going to lose a lot of work. And then the next will take you on to the next screen. You can advance through the application without kind of completing it. So you can kind of go through and see all the various steps of the application. However, when you get to the end and you try to submit, if you're missing anything, the application will let you know where you need to go back to in order to fix things and get your application submitted. So all of these choices were done under phase one, and they will guide kind of what your options will be as you move through. For this particular project, we called this primary project mode and other. You can kind of see your choices here. This is a planning project, so other fits very well. Most of these questions are all your phase one application. So you can kind of step through here. And when you go on to the next page, this is where you'll start getting into the actual phase two application. Primary question here is number 6, your funding type. This is limited by the project type that you chose on the previous page. So if you're doing a roadway capacity project, you are not going to see an option to do CMAQ, and you're not going to see an option to do transportation alternatives. So it's those kinds of things. Transit may be another one that sees more limited things. Transit operations project will likely only see CMAQ funding available to it. So your choices on that first page kind of will determine how the application responds and the different questions that you get. This is really no different than what we've done in the past. And so you can kind of see here, we've provided to you kind of how many characters you have in each one of these, and there are a lot of project dependencies that go on through here. If you experience a problem where you think you should be seeing a question based on a previous answer but are not getting it, do let us know, and we will investigate that. As much as we've tried to kind of stress test this application and make sure our dependencies are all in line, there may be one or two that we've missed through the application. So if you encounter that, please do let us know. Again, you can kind of step through and it will take you through kind of all of the questions that you have to work through as you complete your application. Then you get into the budget and you will identify all these different types of answers here. Federal funding requested in whole numbers, please. Also matching funds, there is a minimum 20% match required. Remember that in most cases, your federal funds are 80% of a number. And so your matching funds are not 20% of your federal request. They're 20% of your kind of overall project costs. So think of your federal funds as 80% of a number, and your match is the difference there. So that can trip some folks up as you go through. We'll want to know what your funding year is, what the source of your local match is, and how any particular ways in which the project could be phased should a project receive less funding than what you were hoping to see. We continue here. We've asked this question now for a number of funding rounds. We'd like to know kind of in your best kind of estimates what the percentage of the cost is for each of the different kinds of modes that potentially within a project. And then also we'll continue this question that we started last time certifying that your agency has the required non-federal matching funds available at the time of obligation of those federal funds. So that question is required. And once you've kind of completed that, you can go through into supporting documentation. You can upload files. It's not required that you do that, but this is an easy way for you to kind of upload letters of support or letters identifying partnership, other pieces of information. Sometimes folks will upload studies that are supporting their project. Anything in those kinds of things. We do accept a variety of formats, including kind of Word formats, PDF, or zip files. If you have more than one file, you can combine them into a single PDF document or create a zip file. And we also provide you with some information about how to create zip files here just through direct links. You have, I believe it's 4 files you can upload to the website, and each of them is limited to a maximum size of 3 megabytes. If you have something larger than that and would like to submit it, please contact me. My contact information is here on this particular screen. Please contact me and we'll make some arrangements for you to get your materials submitted to us. And then from here, you can either submit this application, which is essentially saying, I'm done with this. I'm finished editing it. I want to submit it. Or you can simply save it and then cancel and go back to the beginning. If I hit submit here, it's gonna yell at me because there are the entire application needs to still be completed. But this is what kind of the thing you would see at the end when you're ready to go. So just to check to make sure that you've gotten all of your application materials submitted. If I want to go back to the start, I can hit save and then go back to the beginning through the cancel button. So that is kind of our funding application. Hopefully that kind of walk through gave you some idea of where to start and how to proceed through the application. Looking to see any questions anyone might have related to the phase 2 funding application. I'm not seeing anything in the chat. We moved through quite a bit of that quickly. So should you have questions about it, please feel free to contact any of the staff listed or use the report issue if you get into the application and run into a problem. Otherwise, I think that will kind of wrap us up. And I'm not sure. All right. There's a question in the chat here. Given the pre-application assessment comments, are we to go back and edit the appropriate fields, check boxes in the pre-application section to address some of those comments? It's a great question. Yes, you can go back and edit your phase 1 application based on the comments and feedback that you get. That's kind of a choice for you to make. And I believe at some point there's a question in here, or at least there had been one related to whether or not you had made changes in the phase.
There is one, Mark. I believe is you go to that page, and once you click next, it's in the following page.
Next, okay. So yes, you can. Here you go. It's question number 7. Given the results of the pre-application assessment, has the scope of work been modified in any way compared to the scope proposed in the pre-application questionnaires? Yes, you can go back and make changes and update things to better respond to what the comments and feedback you got in phase 1. We just ask that you identify what changes you had made. Another question, will the pre-application be rescored? Martin, I don't know if maybe you want to address.
Yes, I can take that. Yes, there were a number of the pre-applications that were found to be incomplete. We did not believe that we had sufficient information to make an adequate assessment, and there were some that were found to be not aligned as well, and there were many that were aligned or highly aligned. If the pre-application or the full technical application now includes information that addresses concerns that may have been identified by staff or by planning committee members in a way that addresses the concerns, and we should be able to reassess those applications and get them put in a different alignment category.
Great, thanks, Martin. Any other questions related to our process here? All right, not seeing any additional questions in the chat. Thank you all for attending. Again, applications are due July 29th, Friday, July 29th by 4 o'clock local time here in Kansas City. Do note that if you're feverishly working away in the application at 4 o'clock, it won't kick you out of the application, but it will not let you back in after 4 o'clock. So if you're in there still working, trying to wrap things up, that's all right. Just don't try and access the application, and don't leave accessing the application to add something at the last second until after 4 o'clock. You will not be able to do. So again, good luck to everyone with your applications. Please do let us know if you have any questions, and we thank you for attending the application workshop today.